It's 3:17 a.m. You know this because you've just looked at your phone again for the third time in 20 minutes. You fell asleep fine, no problem at all, out like a light by 10:30 p.m. and actually felt quite pleased with yourself for getting to bed at a decent hour. And then 3 a.m. hits, your eyes are wide open, you're wide awake, mind suddenly racing, and it's not just that you're awake, it's that your heart's pounding slightly, there's this low-level anxiety humming through your system, and your mind is going through your to-do list. Things you need to remember for tomorrow, that conversation you had last week that you're now replaying, the project deadline, whether you replied to that email, and you lie there thinking, this is ridiculous, I'm exhausted, I need to sleep, I have a full day tomorrow. But the more you try to fall back asleep, the more awake you feel. And by 4:30 p.m., you've given up. Maybe you've checked your phone properly by now. Maybe you've gone downstairs for water. Maybe you're just lying there, staring at the ceiling, feeling your exhaustion deepen with every passing minute. And by the time your alarm goes off at 6:30 or 7, you feel worse than you did when you went to bed. And this doesn't happen once, this happens 4 or 5 nights a week, sometimes more, and you might have tried some supplements like melatonin, magnesium, you might have tried herbal teas, meditation apps, but nothing seems to work consistently. And there's this growing fear, is this just what sleep's going to be like now? Is this permanent? This pattern of falling asleep fine, waking up at 3 a.m., unable to get back to sleep is one of the most common things women tell me about, especially women in their 40s and 50s, and especially women with significant responsibilities during the day. And here's what almost no one talks about. This is not a sleep problem, not really. It's a cortisol timing problem, a circadian rhythm problem, and often a blood sugar problem. Your body's releasing cortisol, your primary stress hormone, at completely the wrong time, and when it should be at its lowest point for the entire 24-hour cycle, it's spiking hard. And when your cortisol spikes at 3 a.m., it doesn't just wake you up, it activates your entire stress response system. Heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, your brain shifts into alert, problem-solving mode. You're not anxious because you're lying awake thinking, you're lying awake thinking because cortisol has activated the parts of your brain responsible for threat detection and problem solving. Today, we're talking about why this happens, what's actually going on at a hormonal level when you wake up at 3 a.m., and what needs to happen, not just to fall back asleep, but to stop waking up in the first place. Because here's the thing, this isn't permanent, but your cortisol rhythm is probably off, and cortisol rhythm is something that can be corrected. So before we dive in, I just want to mention something. If you want to understand all 4 foundational pillars your body needs, not just cortisol and sleep, but the complete system, I've created a free 60-minute masterclass. It's called the Quantum Nourishment Masterclass, and it breaks down exactly what's missing and how to start correcting it. So you can watch that at francisnogate.com/masterclass. Or if you prefer the quick start version, you can download my free guide, The 3 Hidden Signals Your Body is Missing, at francisnogate.com/resources. Right, so let's talk about what's happening at 3 a.m. Now, if you don't know me already, I'm your host, Frances Nogate, a certified nutrition and lifestyle advisor qualified at the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, a member of the Federation of Holistic Therapists, and an ambassador for the Public Health Collaboration charity in the UK. And a quick disclaimer here as well, this is not medical advice, so if you've got specific health concerns, especially around sleep or chronic insomnia, please work with your healthcare provider. This is about understanding your body better, but it's not a replacement for medical care. Now, before we get into today's topic, let me quickly explain what I mean by quantum nourishment, especially if this is your first time listening. You might have heard of terms like quantum biology or circadian biology and thought, that sounds really complex, and that sounds like something for scientists. And it can be. There are brilliant researchers and practitioners who explore the deep science of the molecular mechanisms and the advanced concepts. And if you're interested in that level of detail, there are amazing resources out there. But that's not what I do here. My focus here is on taking those complex concepts and translating them into practical protocols you can actually implement. because the science is absolutely fascinating and I love it. But what really matters is what you do on Monday morning, for example. And quantum nourishment is essentially understanding that your body responds to environmental signals, light, timing, meal patterns, temperature, and that when you align those signals with how your body is designed to function, everything downstream starts working better. So it's getting morning light within an hour of waking, it's eating breakfast at a consistent time, it's dimming your lights in the evening, it's understanding why you're waking up at 3 a.m. and what actually needs to change. So simple practical things, but grounded in real biology. So if you ever hear me reference circadian rhythm or the HPA axis or cortisol timing, I'm not trying to overwhelm you with science. I'm explaining why these simple practices work so you understand your body better and that you trust the process. Right, so let's get into what's actually happening when you wake up at 3 a.m. So let's start with what's supposed to happen during the night. So under normal circumstances, your cortisol levels should be at their absolute lowest point during the early hours of sleep, roughly between midnight and 4 a.m. So cortisol should be completely suppressed at that time. This is when your body's in deep repair mode. Growth hormone is being released, cellular cleanup happens, your brain processes and consolidates memories. Cortisol should only start rising again around 2 to 3 hours before you naturally wake up. So if you wake up at 7 a.m., cortisol might start its gentle climb around 4 or 5 a.m. Then when you actually wake, and especially when you get morning light exposure, there's a sharp cortisol increase. And this is called the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. That morning cortisol surge is what gives you energy, alertness, mental clarity. It suppresses any residual melatonin from the night. It raises your core body temperature. It tells your entire system that day has started. But when you're waking up at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding and your mind racing, that cortisol surge is happening at completely the wrong time. So instead of cortisol staying low and allowing deep restorative sleep, it's spiking right in the middle of the night when it should be at its lowest point. And when cortisol spikes, it doesn't just gently nudge you awake, it activates your entire stress response system. Your heart rate increases, your blood pressure rises, your brain shifts into alert mode. Specifically the parts responsible for threat detection and problem solving. Your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight system, gets activated. So suddenly you're lying there and your brain is starting to do problem solving, going through your to-do list, replaying conversations, planning tomorrow, worrying about things that honestly you wouldn't give a second thought to during the day. You're not anxious because you're lying awake because cortisol has made you anxious. So it's not psychological, it's physiological. Your body has released a stress hormone at the wrong time and it's doing exactly what stress hormones are designed to do. Make you alert, vigilant, ready to respond to threats, except there's no threat, you're just trying to sleep. So why is cortisol spiking at 3 a.m. instead of staying low where it belongs? So the primary reason for this is circadian misalignment. I know you hear me talk about this a lot, but your cortisol rhythm, when it rises, when it peaks, when it declines, is governed by your body's master circadian clock, this tiny cluster of cells in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. The SCN controls pretty much every 24-hour rhythm in your body, so sleep-wake cycles, body temperature, hormone release, metabolism, all of it. And the SCN's primary cue, the thing that tells it what time it is light, specifically light hitting specialized cells in your eyes. So when morning light hits these cells, they send a signal directly to the SCN that day has started. The SCN then orchestrates the entire daytime hormonal cascade, so cortisol rises, melatonin gets suppressed, body temperature increases, alertness improves, and in the evening, as the light fades, the opposite happens. So the SCN initiates the nighttime cascade, which is cortisol decline, a rise in melatonin, a drop in body temperature, and you should feel sleepy. But here's what happens with circadian misalignment. So if you're not getting adequate morning light exposure, if you're staying indoors under artificial light in the morning, your SCN doesn't get a clear daytime has started signal. Your cortisol awakening response is blunted and weak, and your morning cortisol doesn't rise properly. Then, if you're getting bright light exposure in the evening, especially blue light from screens, your SCN gets a daytime signal when it should be receiving nighttime signals. So melatonin gets suppressed and cortisol, which should be declining, stays elevated or even rises sometimes. And your entire cortisol rhythm becomes mistimed. So instead of a strong morning peak followed by a steady decline throughout the day and suppression at night, you get a flattened morning response and elevated evening nighttime levels. And when cortisol is elevated at night, it directly inhibits melatonin because these two hormones have what's called a reciprocal relationship. When one goes up, the other comes down. So if cortisol stays high at night, then melatonin can't do its job properly, which means you don't get the deep restorative sleep you need and your circadian rhythm becomes even more disrupted. It's a vicious cycle where circadian misalignment causes cortisol dysregulation, disrupts sleep, poor sleep worsens circadian misalignment, and then the 3 a.m. waking, well, that's often the clearest sign that this cycle is happening. Now, there's another mechanism that causes 3 a.m. waking, and this one is connected to what you ate, or more specifically, when you ate and what you ate. It's called nocturnal hypoglycemia, which basically means your blood sugar drops too low during the night. So here's what happens. Your body's designed to maintain stable blood sugar 24 hours a day. Now, it's normal for it to fluctuate a little bit when you eat, but your brain in particular is incredibly dependent on glucose and it needs a constant supply. So during the day when you're eating regularly, maintaining blood sugar is straightforward. You eat, then glucose enters your bloodstream, then insulin helps move it into cells, and then you use it for energy. And at night, when you're not eating, your body has other mechanisms. So it can break down stored glycogen in your liver. It can create new glucose from amino acids and glycerol through a process called gluconeogenesis. But these mechanisms rely on your metabolic system being properly calibrated, and they rely on your hormonal signals being properly timed. And if you've eaten a large carbohydrate heavy meal late in the evening, let's say 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., here's what can happen. So your blood sugar spikes, your body releases insulin to bring it back down, but because insulin sensitivity naturally decreases in the evening, partly due to rising melatonin, your body might over-respond. So then you get too much insulin, then blood sugar drops too far. Or maybe you didn't eat enough at dinner, maybe you're trying to be good, as it were, and had a very light meal, or maybe you've been restricting calories all day. But either way, by 3 a.m., your blood sugar has dropped below a threshold your body considers safe. And when that happens, your body perceives this as an emergency. Your brain needs glucose, it can't afford to run out of fuel, so then it releases counter-regulatory hormones, which are glucagon, adrenaline, growth hormone, and cortisol. And these hormones mobilize stored glucose. So they tell your liver, break down glycogen, create new glucose, get it into your bloodstream now. But the thing is, the side effect of releasing adrenaline and cortisol at 3 a.m. is that you wake up suddenly with your heart pounding, because adrenaline and cortisol are stress hormones. They're designed to make you alert and ready for action. Your body doesn't know you're safely in bed. It just knows blood sugars drop dangerously low and it needs to fix that immediately. So then you wake up, often with anxiety, often with a racing mind. And the frustrating thing is that by the time you wake up, your blood sugar's usually been corrected. So the counter-regulatory hormones have done their job, but you're still wide awake because cortisol and adrenaline are now coursing through your system. And this is why eating a very light dinner or eating a carb-heavy meal late both increase the risk of 3 a.m. waking. Your body needs stable blood sugar overnight, which means eating adequate protein and fat at dinner, not eating too late, and not going to bed in a significant calorie deficit. Now, if you happen to be in your 40s, early 50s, there's another layer of this, which is perimenopause. So hormonal fluctuations of perimenopause significantly increase the risk of cortisol dysregulation and 3 a.m. waking. And here's why. So during perimenopause, your ovarian hormones, primarily estrogen and progesterone, start fluctuating quite a lot. And they're not just declining steadily, they're swinging up and down unpredictably. So progesterone in particular has a massive impact on sleep quality and nervous system regulation. Progesterone is a precursor to allopregnanolone, which is a neurosteroid that enhances GABA activity in your brain. And GABA is your primary calming neurotransmitter. It promotes relaxation, reduces anxiety, supports deep sleep. And when progesterone levels are adequate, you have good GABAergic tone. So you fall asleep easily, you stay asleep, and you feel calm. But when progesterone drops, which happens increasingly during perimenopause, GABAergic tone decreases and you become a lighter sleeper. You wake more easily, you feel more anxious, and here's the connection to cortisol. The decline in ovarian hormones destabilizes the HPA axis. And the HPA axis is your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and it's the system that governs cortisol release. When estrogen and progesterone are fluctuating or declining, the HPA axis loses some of its normal regulatory control. So the feedback loops that keep cortisol in check becomes less effective. So instead of cortisol declining smoothly, it can spike inappropriately, often right around 3 a.m. And perimenopausal women are significantly more likely to experience middle of the night waking compared to younger women or postmenopausal women whose hormones have stabilized. This isn't just stress or just getting older. It's a genuine physiological shift in how your HPA axis functions when ovarian hormone support decreases, which is why the circadian interventions become even more important during perimenopause. Your body needs clearer, more consistent signals because its regulatory systems are less forgiving than they used to be. And then there's the nervous system piece as well, because all of this, the cortisol dysregulation, the blood sugar instability, the HPA axis dysfunction, it doesn't happen in isolation from your nervous system state. So when your nervous system is chronically in a state of perceived threat, what we call sympathetic dominance or fight or flight mode, it overrides normal circadian cues. So if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, if your nervous system genuinely believes you're under threat, if it's constantly scanning for danger, constantly on high alert, then deep restorative sleep becomes low priority, right? So your body can't afford to be deeply unconscious if it thinks danger is imminent. So even if your circadian signals are relatively good, if your nervous system hasn't shifted into parasympathetic mode, into the rest and digest mode, which is the safety mode, your cortisol rhythm stays dysregulated, and this is why chronic stress, even when it's not life-threatening stress, disrupts sleep so profoundly. Your nervous system doesn't differentiate between I'm being chased by a predator and I have 3 major deadlines, aging parents to care for, and I'm constantly needed by multiple people. So those things both register as not safe to fully relax. And when your nervous system perceives threat, it sends constant danger signals to your mitochondria, and your cells shift from energy production to cellular defense mode. So this chronic activation keeps cortisol elevated. It keeps you in a state of physiological arousal even when you're in bed and trying to sleep. So the nervous system piece is actually crucial. You can't just address light exposure and meal timing. You also need to address nervous system regulation, which might mean breath work, vagal toning, deliberately creating moments of genuine safety and relaxation during the day, not just I'm sitting on the sofa and scrolling on my phone kind of relaxation, but actual parasympathetic activation. Because if your nervous system doesn't feel safe, your HPA axis won't function properly, and then your cortisol rhythm won't normalize. I would also like to tell you my own experience with this, because for years I had exactly this pattern. Obviously, when I had babies and toddlers, I was up multiple times a night, breastfeeding, settling them down. That's just part of having young children. But what I didn't expect was that even after my children started sleeping through the night, I continued to be a very light sleeper for years. So I'd wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. and my mind would immediately start going. And what I told myself was that this is actually quite productive, because I'd start mentally organizing my day, planning what needed to be done, going through my to-do list and thinking through conversations I needed to have and problems I needed to solve. And I genuinely thought that I was being efficient, like, look at me using this awake time productively. When I get up, I'll already have a plan. But what was actually happening was that the mental organizing was creating anxiety, which then made it impossible to fall back to sleep. So I'd lie there for an hour, sometimes 2 hours, with my mind racing and heart rate slightly elevated, and that low level hum of anxiety running through my system. And then by morning, I'd feel absolutely terrible, exhausted, foggy, a bit irritable, and struggling to concentrate as well. And I just thought, this is what sleep's like now. This is motherhood. This is being in my 40s, and this is just how it is. So there's nothing I can really do about it. And I tried some supplements which helped a little bit, but didn't really help consistently by themselves. I tried herbal tea. I have herbal tea anyway, and meditation apps that I'd listen to at 3 a.m. lying in the dark. And nothing really worked reliably until I found quantum biology and circadian health research. And suddenly everything made sense to me. So I wasn't waking up because I had too much to do. I was waking up because my cortisol was spiking at the wrong time, because my circadian rhythm was completely off. I wasn't getting morning light exposure. I was staying indoors all morning under artificial light, and my cortisol awakening response was weak and flattened. And I was also eating quite erratically. So sometimes skipping breakfast, sometimes eating late at night, sometimes having breakfast, and my blood sugar regulation was all over the place. I know this because I tried a continuous glucose monitor, and really my blood sugar was a mess. And I was using screens until the moment I went to bed. So the blue light exposure was suppressing melatonin and keeping cortisol elevated. And my nervous system was in a constant state of low-level activation, because I was managing small children, work responsibilities, household demands, never a moment where I felt genuinely relaxed and safe. So, of course, my cortisol was spiking at 3 a.m. My body was just responding to the signals I was giving it, or more accurately, to the signals I wasn't giving it. Once I understood the mechanism, I could actually do something about it. So I started getting outside within 30 minutes of waking, even when it was grey, even when it was drizzly, and even when I felt a bit silly doing it. I started eating breakfast at a consistent time with adequate protein. I started dimming lights in the evening, blue light blocking glasses after sunset, no screens in the last hour before bed, and I started breath work in the evening as well to calm myself down and to activate that parasympathetic nervous system, deliberately signaling to my nervous system that we are safe, we can rest. And it didn't work overnight. In week 1, I didn't notice much difference. Week 2 or 3, I started sleeping slightly more solidly, not waking up as often. Weeks 4 to 5, the 3 a.m. wakings became less frequent, maybe twice a week instead of 5 times. And by month 3, I was sleeping through the night most nights. And when I did wake up, I could fall back to sleep relatively quickly. Now I sleep really well, consistently, and I sleep deeply as well. Not because I added supplements or medications, but because I corrected the signals. And morning light set my circadian rhythm properly, and consistent meal timing stabilized my blood sugar. Evening light management allowed melatonin to rise and cortisol to decline. Nervous system regulation shifted me out of chronic sympathetic dominance, and my body could finally do what it was designed to do, which is to maintain a proper cortisol rhythm. And the relief of sleeping well again, of waking up feeling actually rested, I can't overstate how much that changed everything else. My energy improved, my mood stabilized, my cognitive function came back. I didn't have brain fog anymore, and I really started to feel like myself again, which I honestly had kind of given up on. So what do you actually need to do about these 3 a.m. wakings? So let's break this down into the key interventions. So morning light exposure within the first hour of waking, ideally within 30 minutes. Just get outside with no sunglasses on, 10 to 15 minutes minimum. This is the single most important signal for setting your cortisol rhythm properly. Morning light triggers your cortisol awakening response, that strong morning cortisol surge, which then sets the timing for the entire rest of your 24-hour cortisol rhythm. So get it right in the morning and your cortisol naturally declines throughout the day and suppresses at night. If you miss it, your entire rhythm is flattened and mistimed. So that's even on grey, overcast days, even if it's raining. As you probably know already, I'm in Ireland, so, trust me, I know about grey days. But outdoor light is still 10 to 100 times brighter than indoor light, and your circadian clock can detect that difference even when it doesn't feel bright to you. And then we've got evening light management. So after sunset, dim your lights, use blue light blocking glasses if you're still using screens, the ones that have the red lenses, ideally. And then ideally no screens in the last hour before bed, because evening light exposure suppresses melatonin and keeps cortisol elevated, and it directly undermines your body's preparation for sleep. So you're essentially telling your brain it's daytime when your body's trying to initiate nighttime processes. Now, this doesn't mean you have to sit in the dark, but dim warm lighting or candles, use lamps instead of overhead lights, and limit screen times with the blue light filtered out. And the reason I said before that to ideally stop using screens an hour or maybe even 2 if possible before bed is because it's not just the blue light. The blue light's important, but it's also the intensity of light. So even if it's not blue light, if you've got bright light in your face, in your eyes, then that's going to keep your cortisol going as well. Another one is meal timing and composition. So eat dinner at a consistent time, ideally finishing at least 2 to 3 hours before bed, and make sure dinner includes adequate protein and fat, not just carbohydrates. Protein and fat slow down glucose absorption and help maintain stable blood sugar overnight. They provide sustained energy without the blood sugar spike and crash that can trigger nocturnal hypoglycemia that I was talking about before. If you're someone who wakes up at 3 a.m. and realizes you're actually quite hungry, that's probably a sign that you didn't eat enough at dinner, or you were eating the wrong types of foods. So your body literally ran out of fuel, or on the flip side, if you're eating a large carb-heavy meal late at night, like 9 or 10 p.m., you're setting yourself up for a blood sugar crash around 3 a.m. So timing and composition both matter. And also nervous system regulation. This is the piece that often gets overlooked, but it's actually really crucial. So if your nervous system's in chronic sympathetic activation, if you're constantly in fight or flight mode, your HPA axis won't regulate properly, regardless of light exposure or meal timing. So you need practices that genuinely shift you into parasympathetic mode, not just relaxation, but actual vagal activation. So breathwork is one of the most effective tools. You could try box breathing or 4-7-8 breathing. So in for 4, hold for 7, and out for 8 with these extended exhales. And these directly activate your vagus nerve and signal safety to your nervous system. So even 5 to 10 minutes in the evening can make a significant difference. Other options include gentle movement like yin yoga or stretching, cold water exposure. Now, that might sound a bit counterintuitive, but it actually activates the vagus nerve. But it might be something you want to try because it doesn't necessarily work for every single person. So that's something you might want to trial for yourself to see if it has a good effect on you or not. And then there's humming or singing, which also stimulates the vagus nerve. And there's time in nature as well. The key is that it actually has to shift your physiological state, not just be relaxing in theory. Now, here's what I need to be honest about as well. What I've covered today is crucial: understanding cortisol timing, circadian rhythm, blood sugar regulation, nervous system state. This is foundational for addressing 3 a.m. waking, but it's not the complete picture. And this is where I see women get stuck constantly. They implement morning light, they fix their meal timing, they start using blue light blocking glasses in the evening. And most people feel noticeably better in the first few weeks just from doing those things. And then they might plateau a little bit. They're definitely feeling better, sleeping better, might still be waking up sometimes, still feeling like something's a little bit off sometimes. And usually it's because there are other pieces missing. Maybe their overall metabolic flexibility is compromised, so even with good meal timing, their blood sugar regulation is still unstable. Maybe they're in perimenopause and they need specific support for hormonal fluctuations that goes beyond basic circadian protocols. Maybe their mitochondrial function is impaired from years of circadian misalignment and they need targeted nutritional support for cellular energy production. Maybe they're dealing with chronic low-level inflammation that's affecting HPA axis function. Cortisol timing and 3 a.m. waking is often the most obvious symptom, but addressing it fully usually requires looking at all 4 of my pillars working together in the right sequence. So this is something you can probably piece together from listening to podcasts and YouTube videos and that sort of thing. You can do some trial and error and see how you go. And it might work for you, or you might end up wondering if you're doing it right because you're not feeling quite right yet. Or you could have the complete framework, all 4 pillars in order, with troubleshooting and support for the first 6 months built in. And this is exactly why I created the Quantum Nourishment Blueprint. So that's got 14 video lessons, personalized baseline assessment, complete protocols for sleep, energy, metabolism, and hormones. It includes 6 months of support from me, and that's launching in spring 2026. You can join the waitlist for that at francisnorgate.com/blueprint. And if you join the waitlist, you get early access and founding member pricing as well. But if you're not ready for that, watch the free masterclass first. It breaks down all 4 pillars and shows you where to start. So you can go to francisnorgate.com/masterclass. So, in summary, the 3 a.m. waking is not just insomnia, it's not just stress, it's not just getting older, it's cortisol spiking at the wrong time. And cortisol spikes at the wrong time when your circadian rhythm is misaligned, which means you're missing morning light and getting bright light at night, or your blood sugar drops too low overnight due to meal timing and composition issues, or your HPA axis is dysregulated due to perimenopause or chronic stress, or your nervous system is in constant sympathetic activation, so then you have no genuine parasympathetic recovery. And all of these feed into each other, which is why addressing just one piece often isn't enough. But when you address the signals properly, morning light, meal timing, evening light management, nervous system regulation, your cortisol rhythm will be restored. Not overnight, but steadily and progressively. So in weeks 1 to 2, you might not notice dramatic changes. Maybe sleeping feels slightly better. You might be waking up and falling back to sleep more easily. In weeks 3 to 4, the 3 a.m. waking becomes less frequent, maybe twice a week instead of 5 times. And then weeks 5 to 8, you're sleeping enough most nights. And when you do wake, you're not wide awake with your heart pounding. It's gentler than it was before. And in months 3 and onwards, you have consistent restorative sleep, waking up feeling actually rested, you have energy during the day, your cognitive function comes back, your mood's more stable, and you start to feel like yourself again. It might not be perfect, some nights might still be harder than others, but the baseline becomes completely different. So your body hasn't given up, but your cortisol rhythm was off, and cortisol rhythm's something that can be corrected. If you found this episode helpful, I'd be so grateful if you could subscribe and leave a review. It genuinely helps other women find the show as well. And if you want to understand all 4 foundational pillars, watch that 60-minute masterclass at francisnorgate.com/masterclass, or download the quick start guide, 3 hidden signals your body is missing, at francisnorgate.com/resources. And if you want more content like this, I send out a weekly newsletter called Quantum Nourishment Weekly. Every week I share practical circadian health strategies, real science made accessible. So you can subscribe at francisnorgate.com/resources, or find me on Substack at francisnorgate.substack.com. Next week, we're talking about something that almost no one discusses, which is grey days, overcast skies, dark winter mornings, the weather that makes you think morning light exposure doesn't apply to me. But here's what I haven't told you yet. There's a specific measurement of light intensity that your eyes can detect, even when the sky looks completely grey to you, even when it's drizzling, even when it feels like there's barely any light at all. And this measurement, this specific threshold, is the difference between your circadian clock functioning properly or being completely offline. I live in Ireland and it's grey here approximately 8 months of the year probably, and dark until after 8 a.m. in winter, sometimes nearly 9 a.m. And when I first learned about morning light exposure for circadian health, my immediate thought was, well, that's not going to work here, is it? That's advice for California or wherever it's sunny. But I was wrong. I was completely wrong, because what I didn't understand was how sensitive those specialized cells in your eyes are, and what outdoor light really means, even when there's not a hint of sunshine. The difference between being indoors under artificial light and being outdoors under grey clouds, it's not just 20% brighter, it's not twice as bright, it's 10 to 100 times brighter, even when it doesn't feel like it. And that difference, that massive difference your eyes can detect but you can't consciously perceive, is what sets your entire circadian rhythm. So next week I'm breaking down the entire grey climate protocol, because if you live anywhere with winter darkness or persistent cloud cover, this changes everything about whether circadian alignment is even possible for you. And just a little spoiler here, it absolutely is. So we'll talk about that next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care and see you next week.